You stand accused, not by me, but by your own experience. The belief on trial today? That getting older automatically means accepting less pleasure, reduced sensation, and diminished vitality in your most private moments. This isn't just wrong, it's dangerous. And for the next several minutes, I'm going to present evidence that this belief has stolen years of satisfaction from you. Not through malice, but through acceptance, through resignation, through the quiet surrender to a narrative that was never actually true. My name is Dr. Charles Bennett, retired urologist, 3 decades specializing in male sexual health, particularly men in their third act of life. And I'm here to formally charge this belief with fraud, theft of quality of life, and conspiracy to rob you of experiences you rightfully deserve. How do you plead? Actually, don't answer yet. Let's examine the evidence first. I need to tell you about Martin, 68 years old, former engineer, sharp as they come. He sat in my office 2 years ago and said something that still haunts me. He said, "Doc, I feel like I'm disappearing, like my body is becoming invisible, even to myself. Not metaphorically invisible, actually invisible." He'd stopped noticing physical sensations, stopped anticipating pleasure, stopped believing his body could generate anything worth paying attention to. When I asked him when this started, he couldn't pinpoint a moment. It had been gradual, imperceptible, like watching ice melt. One day, he just realized he'd been going through motions for years, expecting nothing, receiving nothing, and assuming that's simply what happens after 60. Here's what destroyed me about Martin's story. He was perfectly healthy. Cardiovascular system sound. Hormones within normal range. No structural issues whatsoever. His body was entirely capable of pleasure. He'd just convinced himself it wasn't. The belief had sentenced him to numbness, while his biology screamed otherwise. We spent 8 weeks together, not treating a medical condition, but dismantling a false narrative, teaching him to notice what was actually happening instead of what he expected to happen. 2 months later, he sent me an email. Just 3 words. "I'm back, Doc." That's what this belief does. It doesn't damage your body. It severs the connection between your mind and your physical reality. It teaches you to ignore signals, dismiss sensations, and accept absence as presence. Martin's body never left. He did. And the belief told him that was normal. Let me show you something that should make you angry. A 2019 longitudinal study from the Massachusetts Male Aging Research tracked over 2,000 men between ages 55 and 85 for 12 years. They measured not just function, but satisfaction, quality of experience, self-reported pleasure. Here's what they found. Physical capability declined gradually and predictably with age. Nobody's surprised by that. But satisfaction? That diverged wildly. Some men reported dramatic decreases in pleasure beginning in their early 60s. Others reported increases, actual improvements in their 70s and 80s. What separated these groups? Not testosterone levels, not physical health markers, not relationship status. The determining factor was belief systems and behavioral adaptation. Men who believed decline was inevitable experienced decline. Men who believed adaptation was possible experienced improvement. The physiology was nearly identical. The outcomes were polar opposites. Let that sink in. Your beliefs about aging predicted your actual experience more accurately than your biology did. The Australian Research Centre on Aging conducted parallel research in 2021 with 1,500 participants. Same finding. Men who maintained rigid approaches to intimacy reported progressive dissatisfaction. Men who modified techniques, explored alternatives, and questioned assumptions reported stable or increasing satisfaction across decades. This isn't feel-good psychology. This is hard data showing that the belief aging means less pleasure actively creates the reality it predicts. You're not experiencing inevitable decline. You're experiencing the consequences of believing in inevitable decline. Where did this belief even come from? When did we decide that growing older meant resigning yourself to diminishment? Trace it back, and you'll find something fascinating. This narrative exploded in the 1950s and 60s, particularly in North American culture. Medical textbooks from that era explicitly stated that male sexuality peaked at 18 and declined steadily thereafter. 18. They literally said your best years were behind you before you could legally drink. But here's what they didn't mention. These conclusions were based on refractory period measurements. How quickly young men could achieve repeated climaxes. That was the metric they used to define peak sexuality. They measured speed and frequency. They ignored depth, connection, sensation quality, and emotional satisfaction entirely. It's like measuring cuisine quality by how fast you can eat a meal, completely missing the point. This framework served a specific cultural narrative. Post-war America was obsessed with youth, productivity, and performance. Everything was faster, bigger, more. Sexual capacity got evaluated through the same industrial lens as factory output. And pharmaceutical companies loved it. If aging automatically meant decline, then you needed products to compensate. Billion-dollar industries were built on this premise. Nobody questioned whether the premise was flawed. We just accepted it, internalized it, built our expectations around it. But traditional cultures tell different stories. Taoist practices emphasize that sexual cultivation improves with age. Tantric traditions teach that maturity brings capacity for deeper pleasure, not less. Indigenous wisdom across continents recognizes later life as a period of sexual refinement, not retirement. The belief that aging diminishes pleasure isn't universal truth. It's cultural programming from a specific time and place designed to serve specific economic interests, and you've been living under its verdict your entire adult life. Dr. Sandra Morrison, neurosexuality researcher at Stanford, has spent 20 years studying how the brain processes pleasure across the lifespan. Her findings obliterate conventional assumptions. She discovered that neural pathways associated with sexual pleasure don't atrophy with age. They reorganize. The adolescent brain processes sexual stimuli through excitement and novelty circuits, fast, intense, fleeting. The mature brain processes the same stimuli through integration circuits that connect physical sensation with emotional context, memory, and present moment awareness. Translation? Your brain hasn't gotten worse at pleasure. It's gotten more sophisticated. Dr. Morrison's research shows that men over 60 who report the highest satisfaction demonstrate greater activation in brain regions associated with bodily awareness and sensory integration. They're literally experiencing more comprehensive pleasure than their younger counterparts, not less. But here's the catch. These circuits only activate when you're actually paying attention, when you're present, when you're giving your nervous system something worth processing. If you're still using the rushed, distracted, goal-focused approach of your 20s, you're trying to run advanced software on outdated programming. Your hardware has upgraded, but your techniques haven't. Dr. Morrison puts it bluntly. We've mistaken the decline of adolescent-style sexuality for the decline of sexuality itself. What we're actually witnessing is evolution, not deterioration. But men don't know this, so they abandon exploration right when their nervous systems are primed for deeper experiences. Her lab has documented cases of men in their 70s discovering types of pleasure they never accessed in their youth. Not because their bodies suddenly improved, but because they finally learned how to listen. The capacity was always there. The belief just told them not to look for it. Let's be fair. There are legitimate reasons this belief persists. Your body does change. That's undeniable. Recovery takes longer. Spontaneity requires more intention. The hair-trigger responsiveness of youth mellows into something that requires more attention, more patience, more deliberate engagement, and in a culture that worships efficiency, that feels like loss. Moreover, the medical establishment reinforces this. Doctor appointments focus on dysfunction, not optimization. Erectile difficulties, performance problems. The language itself frames aging sexuality as damage control, not ongoing development. Popular media doesn't help. When older male sexuality appears at all, it's either punchline or problem. Never aspiration, never celebration. You've never seen a movie where the 65-year-old man discovers unprecedented pleasure through mindful adaptation. But you've seen 1,000 where he takes a blue pill and hopes for the best. So you accept the narrative because everyone around you accepts it. Your peers don't talk about this. Your doctor doesn't ask. Your culture doesn't acknowledge alternatives. It's easier to blame biology than to question the approach. Easier to accept diminishment than to admit you might need to learn something new. And there's vulnerability in exploration. Trying different techniques means admitting the old ones don't work anymore. Using tools or assistance means acknowledging change. Asking questions means revealing that you don't have it all figured out. For men raised to be stoic, self-sufficient, and certain, that's terrifying. I understand why you believe this. You were given every reason to, and no permission to question it. But understanding why you believe something doesn't make it true. Let's dismantle this systematically. First, the premise that youth equals peak sexuality. By what measure? If we define quality by depth of sensation, emotional resonance, and sustained satisfaction, then maturity demonstrably outperforms youth. Young men report intense but brief experiences. Mature men report less intense but richer experiences. Which is better depends entirely on what you value. Speed isn't superiority, it's just speed. Second, the assumption that physical changes equal reduced capacity. Your cardiovascular endurance at 70 isn't what it was at 30, yet you can still enjoy a long walk, possibly more than you did at 30 because you're actually present for it now. The same principle applies here. Different doesn't mean lesser. It means different. Third, the idea that techniques shouldn't need adjustment. Absurd on its face. You've adapted every other aspect of your life to your changing body. You wear reading glasses, you choose supportive shoes, you modify your diet, you adjust exercise routines. Why would this be exempt from adaptation? Fourth, the belief that needing assistance indicates failure. Do you feel inadequate using a computer instead of doing calculations by hand? Using a car instead of walking everywhere? Using tools isn't weakness. It's intelligence applied to practical problems. Fifth, the assumption that if it's not spontaneous and effortless, it's not authentic. By this logic, anything requiring attention or intention is false. That eliminates most worthwhile experiences in life. Deep conversations require effort. Meaningful work requires intention. Why should pleasure be different? Sixth, the idea that you should already know everything about your body. You've lived in that body for 7 decades, yet you've probably explored less than a fraction of its capacity. Your nervous system contains billions of sensory receptors. You've mapped maybe a dozen. Claiming expertise while ignoring 99% of the territory is delusional. Seventh, the belief that discussing this openly indicates dysfunction. The opposite is true. Silence creates dysfunction. Communication, learning, and adaptation create optimization. Every single element of the defense collapses under scrutiny. The belief survives not because it's logical, but because it's never examined. So now, it's on you. You've heard the testimony. You've seen the research. You've examined the origins. You've considered both sides. Does this belief serve you? Has it improved your life? Has accepting decline as inevitable brought you peace, satisfaction, or joy? Or has it slowly, quietly stolen experiences you deserved? I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm asking you to consult your own experience, to honestly assess whether the story you've been telling yourself matches the reality you're actually living. If numbness is your reality, is that because your body stopped working, or because you stopped exploring? If dissatisfaction is your constant companion, is that because aging is inherently diminishing? Or because you've been using approaches designed for a different body at a different stage? If disconnection defines your intimate life, is that because connection is no longer possible? Or because you've accepted disconnection as normal? You're the only one who can answer these questions, and your answers determine your future. Not my opinion, not research data, your actual lived experience. What's the verdict? The belief stands condemned, guilty of fraud. It promised to protect you from disappointment by lowering expectations. Instead, it created the very diminishment it claimed was inevitable. Guilty of theft. It stole years, maybe decades, of potential pleasure, exploration, and satisfaction by convincing you not to look for them. Guilty of conspiracy. It worked alongside cultural silence, medical neglect, and personal shame to keep you isolated and uninformed. This belief is obsolete, irrelevant, actively harmful, and you're hereby released from its authority. You don't have to believe in inevitable decline anymore. You don't have to accept numbness as normal, disconnection as standard, or diminishment as destiny. Those were never true. They were just unchallenged assumptions that calcified into accepted reality. The evidence is clear. The verdict is final. The belief is guilty, and you are free. Here's what happens next. Find a piece of paper. Write down the specific belief that's limited you. Maybe it's, my best years are behind me. Maybe it's, real men don't need help. Maybe it's, this is just what happens when you get old. Whatever it is, write it clearly. Then burn it. Actually burn it. Watch it curl and blacken and disappear. I know that sounds theatrical. It is theatrical. That's the point. Your nervous system responds to ritual. Symbolic actions create psychological markers that internal dialogue alone can't achieve. Burning that paper signals to your unconscious that you're done. That chapter is closed. That belief no longer has authority over your choices. If burning isn't practical, tear it into tiny pieces and throw it away. Bury it. Dissolve it in water. The specific method matters less than the intentional act of destruction. This isn't magical thinking. It's applied psychology. You're creating a clear before and after. You're marking the moment you stopped accepting limitation. Do it today. Not eventually. Today. Because every day you delay is another day lived under a verdict that's already been overturned. After years of believing in decline, here's what you're entitled to receive. Permission to explore your body as if meeting it for the first time. Curiosity without judgment. Discovery without shame. The freedom to try approaches you've never considered simply because nobody said you could. Access to information that actually serves you. Resources, tools, techniques designed for bodies like yours right now, not bodies you used to have or wish you still had. Pleasure without apology. Deep, sustained, fully embodied satisfaction that doesn't require explanation or justification. The understanding that feeling good is not indulgent, it's foundational. Time, the space to slow down, to savor, to be present, to treat intimate experiences as worthy of attention rather than items on a checklist. Patience with yourself. Room to experiment, to make adjustments, to discover what works now without measuring against what worked before. Support, conversations with professionals who understand optimization, not just dysfunction. Communities of peers who've navigated similar terrain. Connection to your own experience. The restoration of sensation you've been ignoring, pleasure you've been dismissing, and capacity you've been denying. These aren't luxuries. These are reparations for time lost to a false belief. This is what you're owed, and you can claim it starting right now. This isn't the first belief about aging that's been overturned. We used to believe cognitive decline was inevitable. Then research revealed neuroplasticity continues throughout life. Brains don't deteriorate on a fixed schedule. They adapt based on how they're used. We used to believe physical fitness peaked young and declined steadily. Then we discovered people in their 70s and 80s setting personal records through appropriate training. The body responds to intelligent stimulus at any age. We used to believe creativity withered with maturity. Then we studied actual creative output and found many artists, writers, and innovators produced their best work in their later decades, not despite age, but because of accumulated wisdom and refined skill. Every single assumption about inevitable decline that's been seriously examined has collapsed. Not because aging doesn't involve change, it absolutely does, but because we mistook one type of change for deterioration when it was actually transformation. The pattern is consistent. What we call decline is usually just obsolete approaches meeting evolved capacities. When approaches update to match current reality, performance doesn't just maintain, it often improves. Your situation isn't unique. It follows a well-documented precedent. The belief in decline gets challenged, evidence accumulates, the verdict reverses, and people discover capacities they thought were lost. You're not pioneering unknown territory. You're following a proven path. Listen carefully. There is no going back to the old belief. You can't unhear what you've heard. You can't unknown what you now know. The evidence has been presented, the verdict delivered, the sentence carried out. Any attempt to return to aging means less is psychological self-sabotage. You know better now. Choosing limitation after understanding its origins isn't acceptance, it's avoidance. And here's why that matters. Your nervous system is listening. Your subconscious records your choices. Every time you default to old patterns despite knowing alternatives exist, you reinforce helplessness. You teach yourself that knowledge doesn't matter, that understanding changes nothing, that insight is meaningless without courage. That's not the person you are. You've spent decades learning, growing, adapting. You've navigated career changes, relationship evolutions, technological revolutions. You've proven repeatedly that you can update your approach when reality demands it. This is just one more update. But unlike the others, this one directly impacts your daily quality of life, your embodied sense of aliveness, your fundamental relationship with pleasure and presence. Refusing to adapt here while adapting everywhere else doesn't make you consistent. It makes you selectively resigned. And resignation is a choice, not a requirement. The door back to comfortable limitation has closed. The only direction available is forward, into exploration. into adaptation, into the discovery of what's actually possible when you stop defending obsolete beliefs. That might feel uncomfortable at first. Change usually does, but discomfort isn't damage. It's just unfamiliarity. And unfamiliarity dissolves with practice. So, practice. Try something different today. Ask a question you've been avoiding. Read information you've been dismissing. Make one small adjustment to your routine. Not because I told you to, because you've decided that living under a false belief is no longer acceptable. You are the judge now. You hold the authority. And your verdict is final. Welcome to everything that comes next. This content is for general knowledge purposes. It does not replace evaluation by a qualified specialist. If you have questions or symptoms, seek out your healthcare provider for personalized guidance.